Yes, thank you for mentioning. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar for the renewed IT management certification. I will be your moderator. People are still coming in. Please stay on mute, turn off your video and chat for questions. I will moderate your questions to the speakers. We'll try to make it an interactive session, so feel free to ask questions, and I will also try to ask them in your behalf during the session. Yeah, then we'll start. Yes. Okay, the agenda of this webinar. Well, as mentioned, questions can be asked via the chat. I will ask them in your behalf. We aim to create a dialogue between the speakers so that it's not a one-way communication. The agenda of this session, I will first give a quick introduction about the webinar itself. Then Jesper Oostergaard from ITAMOrg will tell a bit about ITAMOrg themselves and what they stand, what they do. And then we get Steve Lawless, who will tell a bit more about ITAM, why it's important, how does ITAM tie with ITAM 4, and the risk of not doing ITAM. That's the part that I like a lot. It's very intriguing. Yeah, so there we go. In the meantime, people are still attending. Welcome, new attendees. So I'll be your moderator, Maurits van der Plas, Director of Van Haren Learning Solutions. For those who don't know Van Haren Learning Solutions, Van Haren Learning is a sister company of Van Haren Publishing. Van Haren Publishing, you're probably or might be well aware of. They're a publisher for 20 years in the best practice industry. Very well known from publications in ITIL, Prince2, TOGAF, you name it. Van Haren Learning Solutions is a certification organization and sister organization of Van Haren Publishing. We do accreditation, certification, and examination of individuals and organizations. And together with Van Haren Publishing, we support and help ITAMOrg to get their products and certification around the globe and well known amongst our audience. So what does Van Haren Publishing for ITAMOrg? They publish the foundation courseware and the foundation workbooks, but also for SAM and for the HAM certifications. And Van Haren Learning Solutions offers the examination and carries that out. Yeah, sorry if I'm slightly distracted. Try to still get people to join the session. After this webinar, you will receive a request to provide feedback on the webinar, and participants will receive the ITAM workbook for free. We expect this to arrive late October. It might be early November, but then we will inform you and send you a mail. If you got questions after the webinar or in between, feel free to reach out, mail to marketing@vanharen.net, and we're more than happy to help and assist you. Yeah, and then now comes an introduction to Jesper Oostergaard. Jesper, welcome.
Thank you, Maurits. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I'll do the introduction myself. I'm the chairman of ITAMOrg and also one of the co-founders. We founded ITAMOrg back in 2015 as a membership organization, and have been really growing from there. Just to jump onto the next slide, Maurits, please.
Yeah. You.
So the whole sort of the structure, what we're trying to achieve is to really enable collaboration, share knowledge, share experience, and get people to talk together in you know across borders, across organizations, within organizations. And in order to do that, we are organizing we have an international arm, but really a lot of the value and competence and knowledge is to be shared amongst the members in the local chapters. So we set up chapters in different regions and try and help people get together and share their experience. What we typically most often see is that SAM managers, license managers often find themselves a bit as lonely riders. But when you then talk to people in other organizations that might have the same experience in the organization, then it can really help you in your own work in maturing your organization. So we provide the networking, facilitates networking, but also training and certification is key. Obviously, competency development, awareness of ITAM is key. And for the members, we also provide access to a toolbox, knowledge page, and take part in R&D stuff. So we have a number of areas where we can sort of be a facilitator for the work, for the knowledge sharing, but also provide back to members and organizations how to get along with the successful maneuvers in ITAM. We have a number of organizations that we work together with, computer societies in different countries, Irish Computer Society, Danish Computer Society, etc., but also tool vendors. ISO, we are liaison C member of the ISO Working Group 21 that is responsible for developing of the ITAM standards, 19770 predominantly, and actually take part in not just sort of developing standards, but also promoting standards to the industry and to the wider community, and even so, we're actually really operationalizing these standards into a mode where you can facilitate and implement that in your own organization. For the training and examination part, were you saying something, Maurits, or should I just?
No, sorry, just commenting. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry. For the training and certification part, we're working with the authorized training providers, organized ATOs, but then also for the exams, we are working with an examination institute. Over the last 5 years, we've been working with an organization with Action, and now relaunching the ITAM program together with Van Herren Learning Solutions as the consequence of this webinar today. Yeah, please, the next slide, Maurits.
Yeah, sure. Also, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask via the chat, and I can ask them on your behalf to Jasper.
Right. So this picture is really where we've been trying to grasp our philosophy down into one picture. Probably succeeded, but at least gives in one picture an overview of how we like to see the world. So IT assets, we've been divided into the four main categories. There's the software assets, there's hardware assets. These are obviously linked together, tightly linked together. I mean, you cannot talk about managing software assets without also looking into your hardware and configuration and stuff like that. So it's really tied together. But from a logical perspective, we want we have these four categories. Nowadays, you'll see more and more delivered as a service or through the cloud. But obviously underneath there are software and hardware. These are then the liability and responsibility from a cloud provider, SaaS provider. But from you as an asset consumer, you would see your SLA or your contract be your asset actually. And the final category is people and information assets, where it's more some of the security aspects, how to get access to data. Data is presumably the most valuable asset in your organization of all. So being able to and taking be responsible for these assets, it's really key for obviously for IT as a managers, but in collaboration with the security practice and people in your organization that are dealing with these things. We have two pillars that we stand upon. There's the ISO standards I mentioned before, the tiered model. Steve Lawless will come back to that in a while, but also tightly linked together to the service management best practice, ITIL. The philosophy or the thinking behind that is that if you already have practices in place, processes in place, then take advantage of that to the furthest degree, and then add the sort of elements required to also managing your IT assets in much the same way and through the same process framework already in place in your organization. So that's kind of not reinventing the wheel philosophy that is behind that. Yeah, and final slide, I would also just, if you could turn the slides, just recommend you to if you don't already subscribe to the ITAM channel, if you're really looking for knowledge and insight into what's going on in terms of news, in terms of best practice, in terms of people sharing their insight and information in articles and in white papers, what have you, then the ITAM channel is a really important place or dictionary, so to speak, to look into. If you, like we've done here, made a search for ISO, for instance, you'll have lots of articles coming up about that and so on and so forth. So by all means, make a subscription for the ITAM channel. Yeah, I'll leave it with that, Maurits, for now, and also obviously some of the key elements will be covered through Steve's presentation later on.
Yeah, thank you, Jesper. And indeed, the ITAM channel, it's a very active community. I've seen it myself. So it's, well, you can just go there. I would recommend it to anyone. It's a really nice community and environment to learn more. Quickly, some information about the certification. I saw a question also in the chat already. I will come to that one later on, if that's all right. It's a more in-depth question about the exam. About the certification, what certifications are there and which one are coming up? So we have a foundation level and a practitioner level. Foundation is IT Asset Management Foundation certification. It's already available now, and the Software Asset Management Specialist modules will come out shortly. So we expect some around the 16th of November and some around the 24th of November. Also, what we try to do is we support both training organizations and individuals with a lot of content. So Van Haar Publishing will publish the workbook, as mentioned, probably late October. There's also a syllabus available, which will be available for all the levels, which will include learning, the learning journey, what do you need to study, how long is the exam, how many questions are there, basically everything you need to know to do the exam. You can find this online via www.vhls.global. There you can download the syllabus. We also have an online demo exams available, so you can just do the 10 questions of the exam online to just see, okay, how much do I already know? So that's not too much of a boundary to just do that online demo exam. There's also a practice exam included in the exam voucher. Once you purchase it, the exams are done online, remote online exams, which also include a practice exam environment, so you can, well, practice and do a bit of exam training. Then there will also be ITAMOrg official courseware available for all the different modules, and also throughout our partners, probably late October, 23rd of October is an estimate, we'll also have e-learning available, and our partners will be offering that. Then I will now go over to Steve. Steve?
Hi.
Yeah, hi, thank you.
Right, okay, so I'll share my content if that's okay, Maurits.
Yeah, sure, thank you very much.
Okay, as long as I don't share my private emails, and remember to share the presentation instead.
Yes, I'm sure we will be all intrigued.
Oh, yes. Right, the yes. Technology, come on, press the button. Let's see.
Yes. In the meantime, quickly, so anybody, if you have questions, there was already one question that's been asked, but which I will answer later on. But also, if you have questions to Steve or about the certification or anything in that regard, feel free to reach out and I will ask them to Steve so we can get a bit of interaction going. That's our goal. Do you manage, Steve? Yeah, I think something is
Yeah,
happening.
you should see.
Yeah,
Hopefully, you can see the first page of the presentation and not my private emails. Good,
yeah,
good.
no, I so
Technology's
far
not
see
let me
only your
down.
presentation. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Let's do the introductions. I'm Steve Lawless. I'm lead trainer and consultant at Purple Griffin. We're UK-based training and consultancy company. I've been working in IT for over 40 years now, so a long time. It feels a long time. I've been working with ITIL for the last 30 years. And as I discovered, and we'll get onto that in a minute, I've actually been working with ITAM for 33 years. So a little bit longer than ITIL. So part of the presentation is to look at how ITAM and ITIL fit together. So we'll be covering that. But I'm also accredited to deliver VerySM, DevOps, ITAM, SIAM, and even now artificial intelligence training. So even after 40 years in the IT industry, I'm still learning new things. Okay, but that's enough about me. So what we plan to cover is really for the first 15 minutes, looking at why ITAM's so important. In my mind, it's always been important, but why it should be important really across the IT industry, from director level down. Everybody should understand that ITAM is an important element of what we do in IT. Then I'd like to spend about 10 minutes looking at the new ITAM practice in ITIL 4. And I've taken a few screenshots from our practice guide, which I can share with you. Hopefully I won't get my wrist slapped by Axelos, but I'll tell you how to actually gain access to them as well. And then finally, this is really the call to action. This is the risks of not doing ITAM. And the benefits, obviously the other side of it, the benefits of actually doing ITAM and doing it properly. Okay, so we'll be looking at that over the next 30 minutes. If you've got any questions, as Chris says, throw them on chat, and I'm sure he will interrupt me, hopefully not mid-sentence.
I'll try
to ask me a relevant, pertinent question. Right. Okay. So we'll try to keep this as interactive as possible in this new virtual world we're operating in. Okay. So why is ITAM so important? And that this goes back about 33 years, as I said. So it goes to 1987. And 1987, I'd just taken over a new role as tech support programmer, and the first job I was given was to develop a bespoke in-house service desk tool. So my thoughts were, well, how do I do this? How do I build it? What am I going to base it on? And just at the same time, a colleague of mine was retiring, and it had been decided by management that I was also now responsible for the asset register, later to be called a CMDB, or configuration management system, but whatever terminology you want to use. This is going back into mainframe days, dumb terminals, but we had a fair number of early life PCs as well. So it was an insurance company, and we were trying to work with the technology, trying to make the most of it. And Bob, my colleague who handed this over to me, said, right, Steve, I'm handing you a poisoned chalice. Pardon? He was actually handing me a brown plastic coffee cup. But he said, IT asset management was a poison chalice, because no matter what you did, you were always responsible. So if the data was 100% accurate, it was never going to be. But you're responsible for chasing people up for the data to feed into the asset register. If it wasn't 100% accurate, you were responsible for it not being up to date. So it was a no-win situation that I entered into. And Yeah. So yeah, I was. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
And he willingly handed it over to me with a cup of warm coffee inside. I should have kept it, but it was an interesting start to my career in IT. And in those days, we had a limited number of hardware assets and software assets to manage. But I soon realised it was more than just the hardware and the software. It soon developed as I developed the service desk, which was actually a hardware tool, help desk tool at the time.
Yeah.
The backbone really of the tool was the asset register. So if someone rang the help desk, we could link a user with an asset. We could track the asset, the history of the asset, when it was installed, when it was did, when there was a fault on it. And we also then expanded beyond the hardware assets, the software assets, etc., etc. So it just expanded and expanded over time. So that was really my start in the world of ITAM, which was then closely linked to ITIL, the early stages of ITIL back in the 1990s. It's worth reiterating though what an IT asset is. The ITIL definition is it's any financially valuable component that can contribute to the delivery of an IT product service. So it could be a mobile phone, it could be a laptop, could be a server, could be a router. And increasingly, we're looking at cloud assets as well. And we're looking at data assets and information assets. And we're also looking at people as valuable assets within the organization. And it's arguably that people are your most valuable asset. And it's argued that people are your greatest risk as well in an organization. I'd argue around the financial bit. I think there are assets which have got a business value, but maybe not a financial value. So me and Axel don't always agree on some of the terminology, but if this question ever came up and existed, then it's a financially valuable component. Okay.
Yeah.
So and assets have been around for hundreds of years. If you look back, 100 years, 80 years ago, utility companies track their assets. But their assets typically were gas pipelines, water pipelines, electricity pylons. There were a way of delivering a value, and we asset track them. And I worked for a telecoms company, and all of the masts and the towers and everything, they were assets, way of delivering mobile technology to people. And in one organisation, we did combine the non-IT assets with the IT assets in a bigger configuration management database. And it made sense really because IT was the business. So combining the non-IT and the IT assets gave a big picture of how the organisation delivered value.
Yeah. Can I ask a few questions in between?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do you have to manage all assets from the outset? Or?
No. We'll get onto this in a minute, but really it's about identifying one, where you're biggest in terms of assets, of not tracking them, and concentrating on those areas first. And sometimes, if everything's a risk, sometimes it's track the assets you can identify. So if you're working with various stakeholders and Excel spreadsheets full of asset data, then load that data. You can validate the accuracy of it later, but it's a good starting point. So start where you are. Don't try to boil the ocean. You won't be able to do everything together. Some organizations say the software licensing's their biggest risk, so that's where they start. Other organizations, hardware is easy to find sometimes, maybe not now when it's in everybody's houses, but some organizations start there. Again, what's of value? You need to sort of do a baseline assessment, identify where you currently are and where you want to get to. And we'll talk on this a little bit later as we go through the presentation.
Yeah, thanks. And so there's a few questions regarding the certification. I will answer them after Steve's story. There's also another question for you, Steve, and I think it's regarding security. So the question is, every organization today is doing asset management as part of the implementation of any management system like ISO 27001, etc. So what exactly is going to add value to that?
The accuracy really and completeness of the assets. So some of those assets may be in the cloud, so that may be invisible, but there may well be a security risk. Being honest, but people who work in infrastructure management and software management, software development, deployment, don't always think that the documentation is most important, especially if they're working in an agile environment. It's more about getting the software working rather than document it. So having good ITAM practices in place really is going to ensure that we've got more accurate data, better quality data, more complete data to do our information security management or capacity management or availability management. So it's really about, I suppose it's raising the profile of IT asset management. But for many years it was seen as a background task. We'd do it when we had time. I know this firsthand because I was working at one organisation, and I noticed for about a week we hadn't had any data from one of the teams, and I went upstairs. Someone was on holiday for a week. There was a big stack of paper on his desk about all the new assets. Because he was on holiday, nobody else thought it was important, so they were just sat there. And we were starting to get calls, early life failure calls on these assets, which we knew nothing about. So it's really about raising the profile of asset management. It's, as we'll see a little bit later, it's not something to be ignored or forgotten about, or we'll do it when we have,
or when the fines come in.
Yes, I do have a story about that a little bit later. This one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Apologies. So a few questions that I quickly also answer. So one question is, sorry to interrupt your story, Steve, but is the ITAM certification still available via Exin? And no, that's not the case, Gerco. We're the sole provider of the ITAMOrg certifications from now on. So the Exin exams are no longer available. And another question is regarding how this is different from the ISO 55001. And I think that answer, if you don't mind, we answer in the chat. In the Q&A, not in the chat, but in the Q&A afterwards. Also the question if we will discuss specific tools. That one I think we'll also answer in the Q&A if that's all right. But please do keep asking questions, and we'll go through them all. Okay, Steve, back to you. Sorry.
As I'm saying, ITAM really, in my mind, is more important than ever. Especially now we have assets scattered around the country, in people's homes. Understanding who has access to them, what they're being used for, is more important than ever. So we do need to track these assets and who has access to them. Asset management really, or IT asset management, is looking at all of the various bits, components which make up a service. And service management really, in my car analogy, is the engine that makes the assets move. And this one's very pertinent to me, and I give you an analogy about it. This is a 2000 Mark IV Golf GTI, and I have one of these sat on my driveway at the moment. Not this particular one. The one I've got sat on my driveway has been there for 4 years, and there's a big blue tarpaulin over it. The reason it's been sat there for 4 years is because it's got no wheels on it, no suspension, no seats, no engine. It's my son's project. Unfortunately, he's taken assets out of the car and he can't find some of the assets, like the wiring loom. I know where some of the assets are, he doesn't. The chance of remember putting it back together again as a classic 20-year-old Golf GTI is very slim. And that's because he hasn't kept track of the assets. So he takes bits out of the car, puts them in a cardboard box in the garage, and my wife moves the cardboard box and puts it in the cellar. So he's lost track of his assets. And I tried explaining ITAM to him, but he's a young man and wasn't really that interested, being quite honest. So, yeah. But I like my analogy. My other analogy is that ITAM is your foundation, it's your footings. It's if you're building a house, you need to have good firm foundations, and it's the same with IT service management. You need good firm foundations, and the good firm foundations are your asset data. It's your asset register, your CMDB, your CMS, whatever you want to call it. But there's no benefit in documenting for documentation's sake. So there's no benefit in putting foundations down if you're not going to build on it. So the asset data really is only of use when other people make use of that data, whether it's information security management, whether it's the service desk, whether it's problem management, change enablement. Other processes will use this data. So you need to engage with the stakeholders and find out what data do they require you to collect and hold. Financial management would be interested in how many desktops we've got and will they need to be replaced? When do they need to budget for replacement? How much are we paying for licensing? Are we overpaying, underpaying?
Quite relevant.
So there's lots of areas that will make use of this. Unfortunately, as with foundations, what tends to happen is these foundations will get covered up with soil and forgotten about. Really, my analogy is about exposing your foundations in terms of making them front and center, in terms of this is what allows us to do problem management, capacity management. This is what allows us to do information security management. So we need to put the effort into ITAM. We need an ITAM strategy. Okay, so it's about raising the price. Okay, and your foundations need to be as good and as firm as they need to be in terms of what you're going to build on them. So if you're going to build a 2-story house, there needs to be a certain specification. If you're going to build a 4 or 6-story apartment block on top of foundations, they need to be a lot more solid. So it depends really what use you're going to make of these, of the data, is really the amount of effort you need to put into the data to keep it up to date and accurate and complete.
So Steve, Yannick, thank you for asking a question, Yannick. Yannick asked, do you consider a virtual machine as an asset?
Yes. It's if it delivers value, if it's got financial value for the organization. And assets don't have to be a physical entity. They could be a logical entity. So we can talk about service assets, knowledge assets. It's any component. So it doesn't need to be physical. It could be a cloud asset.
Exactly.
So it's really whatever you decide makes sense for you as an organization to record information about. Pointless recording information about assets which people are never going to use. So in an organization, we may have some fixed assets, and the only people who are interested in finance. So the only attributes we'll keep about them are the financial attributes. Other assets which are highly mobile, we probably need to keep track of those a lot more closely, because the fact they are mobile, they will disappear. And in my early days, I worked for organizations where assets would regularly disappear on an annual basis. And we only realized the year when we did an annual audit that they disappeared. And then it was a case of tracking them down to try and figure out where we'd lost them.
In Dutch we say they're falling off the wagon.
Yes, So Yeah, I won't name and shame. I won't name and shame the companies. And something's ringing in the background.
Yeah.
I've just realised it's me. So, my apologies. Oh, yeah. Okay. But apologies about that. Technology. Hate technology. Why did I ever get involved?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next section is really looking about the tie-up really between ITAM and ITIL 4. ITIL 4 came out 2018, so it's been around for about 2 years now. And one of the big things for me was that ITAM is now a practice within ITIL 4. It's one of 34 practices, and those practices now include project management, business analysis, information security management. So in ITIL version 3, we have 26 processes. The emphasis in ITIL 4 is on practice, and practice is people, process, and technology, essentially. And there are 34, as I said, 34 practices, and ITAM is one of them, and it's one of the key ones to me. So if you want to gain access, because there's about 50 pages worth of information about the ITAM practice, the way to gain access is through something called My ITIL. So if you take an ITIL foundation course, or literally any ITIL exam through PeopleCert, who's the examining institute for Axelos, you will get 12 months free access to My ITIL. So you can get access to all of this good information, which is recorded across those 34 practices. So it's about 1,700 pages of data and information, which won't be published elsewhere, won't be in any of the other ITIL books. It's only accessible via My ITIL. After the first 12 months, obviously there's a payment, and it's £50 a year, which goes to Axelos after that. So, but you can download the practices. The idea is that they'll be kept up to date as technology and approaches and methods and frameworks change over the years. Okay, so that's the tie-up between ITAM and ITIL. What we've got though is something which matches quite well. In that one concepts in ITIL version 4, or sorry, not version 4, I'm not allowed to call it version, ITIL 4, is this concept of the 4 dimensions. And the 4 dimensions are areas of consideration that you need to engage with. So if you're making any decision, if you're planning, you should look at these 4 dimensions, which are organization and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, value streams and processes. And they map very closely onto the asset type, which we talk about in ITAM. So they're very well with hardware, software, people, information, cloud assets, and service assets. So when we're looking at best practice within ITIL, we're also mapping onto the best practice within ITAM. So there's a very, very close link. And as we've already said, ITAM underpins all of the other areas within ITIL. So it's a vital area to engage with and make sure we're doing it well. So we'll just have a look through a couple of the other areas of ITIL, which again map back to ITAM. So we've got this concept of guiding principles. So 7 guiding principles in ITIL 4, and each of them really is again an area of consideration, like the 4 dimensions. Every time we do anything, really, make a decision, review improvement actions, and the ones which I like, which map best onto ITAM, start where you are. So literally with ITAM, you would start where you are, focus on value. So what value does recording this asset data, what value does it provide to the organization? Progress iteratively with, so don't try to boil the ocean, don't try to eat the whole elephant in one sitting. So, work slowly. So have phases within your project, your ITAM project. Also optimize and automate. So use tools and technology where it's appropriate, and keep it simple and practical in terms of the data you're collecting. Another one, collaborate and promote visibility. So collaborate with the various stakeholders, understand what they require from your asset data. Okay, so again, good mapping between ITIL and ITAM. And we've got process workflows. So there's 3 process workflows here. In terms of strategic requirements, so that the tasks or activities, and these are documented in the ITAM practice. What I would say is, please don't just copy these. Don't just copy them and paste them as your ITAM documentation, your ITAM process documentation. Okay, adopt and adapt. So use this as a straw man, and take bits out of it, add bits to it, drill down into the various areas which are of value to your organization. Yeah, whether you're a small, medium enterprise or a global organization. So we've got a workflow for new strategy or requirements. We've also got a process workflow in ITIL 4 around new requests, how new requests are handled. And this will be different for the different types of assets. So whether we're talking about hardware or software assets, we're talking about different life cycles. And in the foundation course, we'll look at the various different types of assets and the life cycle around those assets and how they should be managed in terms of the activities. But this is sort of a high level overview in terms of the process workflow. And lastly, the third ITIL 4 process workflow, audit. And this sort of takes us back to the risks. So the risks associated with non-compliance around our software licensing position. So it's about how do we plan an audit, an internal audit, rather than wait for an external audit? How do we collect asset data? How do we verify and validate the asset data? How do we review and verify our audit findings? And how do we communicate our audit report? So it's really about understanding what risks we're subject to. And this maps very closely onto the new version of ISO 19770 in terms of the SAM standard, the software asset management standard. In terms of the first tier is trustworthy data. Then we're looking at interfacing our activities. Finally, it's about optimizing and automating the audit and the data collection and reporting. So we're using tools and technology. That's sort of a tier 3 within ISO 19770. Okay, so there's 3 process workflows you can hook into with ITIL 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a few more questions, Steve, but since we have 10 more minutes, I figure we'll ask them at the end. So we'll just finish within this hour, and then the Q&A session will be next hour for those who are still able to attend. Right.
Okay. The last section really is looking at risks, but also the opposite, the benefits of doing ITAM. So the main risks, not in any particular order. The risk of not doing ITAM is that you have inefficiencies, so you will find it harder to plan. First stage of your project plan may be gather the, whereas if we do IT asset management correctly and we do it well, the data will be there set. Other risks are things like data loss, and there are consequences. In the UK, we have the Information Commission's Office, and they can impose multi-million-pound fines on organisations which don't do what they should be doing in terms of data protection. So understanding where your data and information is vitally important. You could also suffer financial loss, penalties, and not just in terms of the Commissioner's Office, in terms of data protection, but also in terms of being sued by organisations or even individuals, which also then may result in brand destruction. And organisations spend years building up a brand, and it can be destroyed overnight by some bad publicity. If millions of records are stolen because we've not understood where a database sits, and other people have gained access to it. Also, in terms of compliance, software license compliance, I ran a course a couple of years ago now, and the first part of it was a face-to-face course, and first part of the course is the introduction, and I asked one person why they were there, and they said they were there because they'd just been hit with the 6 million for non-compliance. They failed an audit, and it was wow. That's a lot of money. And a lady on the other side of the table went, 6 million, that's nothing. We've just been hit with £46 million fine. So I pointed out to them that it would have been a lot cheaper if they'd come on the training course and understood compliant from the outset, rather than risk the audit and the fines.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. Ultimately, the biggest risk is potentially imprisonment. I've yet to see anybody go to jail, but I'm working as a IT asset manager. I have worked. I've told IT directors my job is to keep them out of. So, but I probably none deserve to go to jail. But yeah, it was always. It is always a risk. Okay, so the reverse side is benefits. If we are doing ITAM and we're doing it well, and we know how to do it well because we've been on a training course and we've passed an exam, we've got a certificate to say that we know how to do ITAM well, and we're doing ITAM well. It protects the value of our assets. It also allows us to do things more efficiently. We can optimize our existing resources in terms of reuse and recycling, software licenses and components. It reduces any financial and security risk in terms of data loss or lack of non-compliance, and it also makes us make better decisions. So we make a decision based on and if our knowledge is lacking because of lack of data, then potentially we can make an ill-informed. So better decision making from management, from any stakeholder really, is a key benefit. So last couple of slides. How do we get started? And again, I've stolen from ITIL. So this is our continual improvement method. People who've done ITIL version 3 would see it as the CSI approach. But really, it's about what's our vision for ITAM. So we need to develop an ITAM strategy and a vision for where we want to be eventually. Whether it's we want to be ISO 55000 and ISO 19770 compliant, or we want it some sort of maturity level. Again, it depends on the organisation. Really, it's about identifying where we are now in terms of our assets. Where are we? How many have we got under management? How many do we think not managed? We need to develop a plan to get where we want to be, or at least a milestone, at least of our project. We need to engage with our stakeholders because we're not going to do this on our own. We may just be one person, but there are lots of stakeholders who would benefit from access to our asset data. And we need to engage with them to see how they can contribute to keeping the data up to date and accurate and complete. And then we need to make it happen. So we need to carry out activities. We need to identify where these assets are. If we've got technology, great. If we have to crawl under desks and collect serial numbers off the backs of PCs, then so be it. Or searching cupboards. So yeah, we need to make it happen. We need to go out and do it. And then we need to monitor and measure in terms of validation, verification, audit, in terms of whether we've actually achieved what we want to achieve. And we need to regularly engage and collaborate with the various stakeholders. So they're really the tasks which we can map onto the CI method. Getting started, I'll just reiterate again, work closely with these stakeholders. These people will benefit. There's no benefit in documenting for documentation's sake. It's about providing access to that data for the various stakeholders who will benefit. It's also about identifying the various asset types and the different life cycles we'll have, and create different processes and procedures and standard operating procedures. It's about selling the benefit throughout the organisation of ITAM. So from the top down, from directed downwards. I've said developing policies, processes and procedures. Yeah, we'll do that. But also integrating those processes and procedures with configuration management, with deployment management, release management, with the other process areas within IT, and also outside of IT in terms of legal, finance, HR.
Yeah.
And then optimizing and automating with the available tools and technology. There is a saying, one of my colleagues, another ITIL trainer, says, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So, so make sure you optimize your processes first before you automate them. And then also make sure that you can afford the tool and the tool will actually do what you want it to do. You don't want to implement a tool which is going to limit what you can do.
Yeah.
And also increasingly we have tool set integration. I had someone on a course a few months on an ITAM course, and they bought the tools, but they had no budget to integrate them. So they had two tools which were standalone, and they the company would have vastly benefited from integrating the two technologies together. But there was a premium to pay to interface them. They hadn't realized that from the outset. So that's probably a question to ask your tool vendor in terms of if I integrate tool A with tool B, is it going to cost me any more? Okay. And the photo on the right hand side, that's a picture
you,
of me back in 1980 collecting serial numbers from underneath the desks. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was my excuse anyway.
True dedication.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had 15,000 desktops, so it was a long job.
And some were lost, so.
Yeah.
So I will quickly, we'll do a Q&A after this. I'll quickly show a last slide that we have for everyone that has to leave now.
Okay.
So
just hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. So if you see my screen, so quick for everybody that has to leave. We now anybody that joins an ITAMOrg course with one of the training vendors, they get a 1 year free ITAMOrg membership. So that's a nice giveaway. And if you register for the syllabus download, you get a limited 20% discount on the exam. So that might also benefit you if you want to do training or just the exam or anything in that regard. So I would recommend taking use of it. We'll send you after this. We'll send an email that will help you to get all this information accessible. For those that have to leave, I hope you enjoyed the webinar so far. Then we'll now go back to the Q&A because I have a few more questions for Steve, if that's okay, and maybe also even for Jesper. So let me, we'll go back to Q&A. Okay, 1 second while I grab the questions there. So we'll try to start from the top if that's okay. I'm not sure if it's a question to you, Steve, or it's a question to Jesper, but one question is how is this different from the ISO 55001 asset management? How is this certification different from that one?
Right. ISO 55000 is general IT asset management. Well, it can be applied to asset management, not just to IT asset management. So it's how would I say, it's more generalized. Whereas what we're doing with the new release of the ITAM course, the ITAM Foundation course, is to look at the different asset types, look at the benefits of tracking those assets and the life cycle. So we're going more in depth as opposed to sort of an ISO 55000, which is a general certification. But we also, for things like software asset management, we go into the 3 tiers of ISO 19770.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Jasper, are you also still available? I will
am
ask
indeed.
questions to Jasper and Steve. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I got a question here early on. Somebody from Yannick, a question from Yannick. I've passed the ITAM Foundation certification 4 years ago. Is that one different from this one? What's different? Could you give a small overview of that?
Yeah, I'll be very honest. It's not big things that has happened to the foundation. It's really just a smaller updates. So you would probably, well, you might even have your study book and material you can use. But other than that, if you're already joining this call, you'll have a free version of the ebook, so you can check out for yourself. But it's not this update is not very big. It's smaller. It's small updates.
Yeah, but one maybe difference is that now it relates a bit more to ITIL. Also, the update in ITIL 4 that's in relation to this ITAM IT asset management certification. That relationship is quite strong, which was not there 4 years ago, and it's also thanks to the update from Axelos in the ITIL certification. And as I understood, also the team from ITAM has actually collaborated with Axelos to produce that content.
Absolutely, yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So there's a strong relation that I know, but I'm not one of the people that knows in depth about it. Okay. Then I got a question. Thank you, Andres. Thank you for this fantastic webinar, Maurits. For this session, can we get the recording? So yes, we will provide the recording afterwards. Thanks for asking. Another question, I'm not sure if it's to you, Steve, or to you, Jesper, but how is this course or exam different from those by ITAM, ITAM?
Yeah, no, I can probably try and give an answer. Well, the ITAM has been around for many years and has more or less developed sort of their own best practice and looks of the world. Sort of our raison d'etre is that we really thought that to gain the real uptake of these things, we really need to adhere to and support the standards out there and the already implemented process framework ITIL. So that has really been the basic for all of our development. We're more or less operationalizing that from ISO and ITIL. So there's a huge difference in that. Having said that, obviously there are areas where you can say, well, this is similar, this is not, but the whole philosophy is very different.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Perfect. And then I think this question is for you, Steve. It's a big one. When working in a very large organization, there are large volumes of assets that change hands frequently. Getting exact data and tracking where everything is requires a lot of manpower, which is expensive. At the same time, losing assets and having replaced them is also expensive. So where would you say is the sweet spot in terms of risk/economy, benefits/ data accuracy, etc.? That is $1 million question.
It is. I don't think there's a simple answer. I think it's a case of identifying what can be automated. So in terms of data collection and validation, and identifying really the biggest risk areas. So if you have limited resources, identify where the biggest risk areas are, focus your resources there, but also sell ITAM in terms of the benefits the organization can gain if people invest in ITAM. So going back to 33 years ago, there was literally Bob had to track the infrastructure across 90 branches plus head office, and it was a manual effort in those days. So it had limited accuracy, and because it had limited accuracy, people didn't use the data. It's only when we started to automate the collection of the data and the accuracy of the data that people then saw the benefits of starting to invest. And again, it's about your stakeholders, senior management. It's a bit of a carrot and stick in terms of here's the benefits. If we invest in ITAM, these are the benefits we can gain. But these are the risks of not doing ITAM, and that's the stick. You could end up in jail. We could end up with multi-million-pound fines. So isn't it worthwhile investing in ITAM now, so we don't end up on the front page of the and we don't end up in a court case? So it's really about senior management making those decisions in terms of investment in ITAM. But as I said, no point in documenting for documentation's sake. Other people have to use this data. So you need mature processes sat on top of those foundations to actually make use of the data. If no one's using it, what's the point in collecting it? We'll just pay the fines. You do need a strategy.
Just pay
the needs.
46 million fine.
I won't say who it was. They'd be very embarrassed. Hopefully they did pay the full fine. Hopefully they agreed to settle outside. But with a lesser amount. But still, that was a big fine. And it's not the biggest one I've heard about.
Now at the ITAM channel from ITAMorg, you can also find more goosey articles and stories. If you're really interested into this, there's a few. This is not even the winner by a long shot. So if you're interested, want to have more urgency, you can find more articles there. Also a question, I think we slightly mentioned it, but from Yannick. Looking at ITIL 4 and Verizon, which both cover ITAM in a certain way, what is the added value of ITAMorg and the ITAM certification?
It's the foundations. It gives you a greater emphasis on the detail in terms of ITAM. VerySM is enterprise service management. ITIL is arguably sort of IT service management, although they'd like to consider it to be enterprise service management. Really, you need to make sure you've got good foundations. So training people how to do ITAM well is a worthwhile investment. And I've seen organizations where there's been one person trained in ITAM, they've left the organization, it gets forgotten about, or they've outsourced ITAM to a managed service provider, and then they've not tracked the provider, and the asset data has become out of date, and it's a major expense then to get the data back again to a trustworthy state. So it's really about you reap what you sow. So if you don't sow, there's not going to be a harvest. If you invest in ITAM, then you can build the rest of your processes on top of it. You can't have a mature problem management process if you've got poor asset data. So you can't be CMMI level 5 problem management if you're level 0 or level 1. So it's about maturing the area and getting people enthused in terms of ITAM. It's not the sexiest of, of practices.
Yet.
But it's necessary. Someone needs to do the hard work.
Yeah.
Obviously, automate as much as possible, but it still needs to be done. As Bob said to me, it's a poison chalice. Yeah, it's you'll get criticised if you don't do it. You'll get criticised if you try to force people to do it. Yeah, engage with those stakeholders. It's about collaboration. It's a team effort. Get them interested in what use they can make of the data. Yeah, if you're not going to make use of it, what's the point in having it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you. So then we have a few more. There's one question regarding is it going to be available in French? Is the certification in French? ITAMOrg is a membership which is governed by, managed by members. I think from a Van Hagen perspective is if there's a big enough community to help translate the material, it could be available in French. I think it might come available in German anytime soon. Jesper, what's your vision on this?
No, I agree with what you're saying here. The form exam was both available in French and German, and we have already commitment that it will be available in German, and we are working to also have it available in French, but it's not committed at this point. Certainly, the platform supports a number of different languages, so we might even go beyond that. But it's going to be like a the French might be the next in line, but other than that, on requests. So anybody's interested in other languages, do reach out to us, and we'll have a proper evaluation on sort of the business case and the interest with also translation partners, etc.
Exactly, and also let us know when you like to contribute, because it's membership driven, so that really helps. Yeah. Okay. In terms of so I got here a question: is there market data available on the number of sites, number of ITAM certified professionals per country? I don't think yet from this point on. But if the data comes available, I think we're happy to share. Of course, there's several providers, so it's hard to find one overall vision, one overall data that shows all the certified professionals. But maybe in time we'll try to share that information.
One comment is that there are too few. But
there's too few, and that results in too many fines. There's a strong correlation there, though. Although you do see a movement now, you saw Verizon picking it up earlier, and now
exactly,
really invested in it.
Yeah.
So you really see a movement. Also, server asset management. It's really that industry. Also, the tooling industry environment. It's growing. You see big providers, just ServiceNow, picking it up, offering more solutions into it. So the general population interest is growing. That connects me to a question. So I got a few more questions, more in depth about ITIL, and I got one about the different tooling. If we're going to discuss this, I'm not sure, Jesper. Jesper, Steve, what do you think? Do ITIL first or the tooling, or not?
I'd suggest ITIL. You need to optimize your processes, really. You need to have good policies, procedures in place before you look at the tooling. The tooling is necessary because it's a long job if you're doing it manually. But I've seen so many people invest in tools and then not implement them well, or they've bought the wrong tool. So you need to spend time understanding what tools are available on the market, how they integrate, what's the best tool for you. And you only really know that once you've actually understood what your processes and procedures are.
Yeah, exactly. I think that in this call we won't discuss the different toolings, will we, Steve and Jesper? I think that's maybe something for a different call.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is at the moment sort of agnostic in terms of we don't recommend any particular tool, and I wouldn't want to be recommending tools against other tool vendors at the moment. I think it's really down for the tool vendors to sell their tools, but also to be sort of held to account in terms of the limitations of their tools, because every tool vendor would tell you that their tool will do everything. Give them the chance.
Exactly. So another question. I think we'll round up the call in about 50 minutes. Until then, I still got some questions we will discuss, so that everybody knows that's still in. Thank you for still listening. I got a question regarding more in depth regarding ITIL, the ITIL guiding principles. So Steve, are all the 7 guiding principles relevant all the time to the ITAM practices?
No, not all the time. Not all of them all of the time. Some of them will be more relevant than others. So it's really about the right ones at the right time. So in terms of if you start with an ITAM project, then it would be about keeping it simple. Start where you are, and they're really the principles to start you off with. Ultimately, then it's about collaborating, promoting visibility of the asset register, and then ultimately it will be optimize and automate. So there is sort of guiding principles you will apply, but you should keep all 7 in mind at all times and think, oh, I need to apply that here, or so it's really about looking at those guiding principles as sort of background things, which they're like they sit on your shoulder and remind you, don't forget about visibility, don't forget about keeping it simple, don't forget about value, who's going to gain value from this. So it's like having little devils on your shoulder, constantly prodding you, but don't forget me, don't forget me.
Sounds very interesting, working with Poisoned Chalices at 7 devils on your shoulder.
The 20-year-old Golf GTI in parts on my driveway. I live an interesting life.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping in the positive atmosphere, regarding risk that you mentioned, you also mentioned the risk of brand destruction. Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, every organization tries to build a brand, and companies protect it with trademarks and things like that. So brand is very important to most organizations. I have a brand, and I try to protect that brand, in terms of good customer service and and openness and honesty and all of the other good things, good moral sort of background. But it's too easy to lose the brand. The example I always quote, there was a famous jeweler about 15 years ago. He made a joke about why was his jewelry so cheap, and he had about 1,000 jewelry stores in the UK. And he joked, he said they were tat. He said they were, it was rubbish. And the press were there, and the press picked up on it and said, even the managing director says this jewelry is rubbish. And within 12 months, the brand had disappeared. All of the jewelers were sold. And I think it was about 10 years later, he did a presentation in front of the Institute of Directors and said, someone said to him, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? And he said, trying to rebuild my reputation. So reputation of brand is very important to organizations, and not protecting your data, being non-compliant and getting dragged through courts. That can impact brands.
It's not so beneficial.
Occasionally, some people say, any publicity is good publicity. But more often than not, it's not. So
exactly.
So it's if you go to the marketing department and say, okay, I can protect your brand if you you give them £1 million to do ITAM, you know, hopefully they'll say, right, here's the $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So another question, I think this is the last one regarding in relationship to ITIL, and that's you previously, oh no, I'm not sure if it's related, I think so, previously shared, you shared the table which shows how to start with ITAM, that was of the Axel series.
Yeah.
So that's about how to start with ITAM. What if somebody has already started with his journey? Is that same table still applicable, or?
Yeah, you may have maybe halfway along that journey, but you still need to have a vision. You still need to understand that you are halfway along that journey. So you would still apply the CI method or the CI approach. Not every organisation is a greenfield site starting from scratch. So again, it takes you back to one of those guiding principles. Start where you are. So if we've got hardware assets, software assets under control, then look at your data, information, people, cloud assets. Do we need to control those? How do we control them? So that's your next step on your journey to achieve the vision of whatever your vision is, but whether it's maturity, ISO 19770 and ISO 55000 compliant, or whether it's some sort of a maturity level that you want to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So there was also a comment of Lewis that mentioned, okay, great, well, we can set up something in the French region. So you see the initiatives are already picking up. Yannick also supported the initiative. So that's good. I think we can wrap up here. There's a few more questions. We'll answer them to you in person. There's also some questions related to the previous exam and how that translates and what's going on there. So we will answer you in person and reach out to you what happened or what's changed and how that affects you. And we always try to sort everything out. Yeah, I hope that everybody joined this or enjoyed this webinar. It's always I always like to create a dialogue that for me it's easier, it's more fun, and in the beginning with these webinars it feels a bit silent, like you're alone speaking to everyone, but luckily at a certain point we managed to get that dialogue going, so thank you for that. Yeah, thanks everyone for participating. We'll come back to you with information. Yeah, and good luck with your IT asset management journey. Yes.
Thanks, Maurice, for setting it up. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, Jesper. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.